Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. But in short, what we do is we take a look at a specific subgenre of horror, and then look at a few movies from that subgenre. Today, the subgenre we're looking at is home invasion horror movies. And the home invasion horror movie has been around for a while, but seems like it's only gained in popularity over the years. It seems like we see more of them now than we did back in the day. And I'm not really entirely sure why that is. I know that typically horror movies, the horror genre, tends to reflect societal fears or just society in general. Like, the 1950s, there was all those monster movies that were, a reflection of the fear of the atomic age. But I don't really know what's driving the home invasion horror boom. I can't really put my finger on it. My best guess is that it has to do with personal safety or personal privacy. The home invasion movie taps into a particular fear that, for me in particular, is a pretty strong one, which is somebody invading your home, your safe space, the one place where you should be able to let your guard down and not feel terrorized, And yet these movies violate that feeling, that sanctity, if you will, of the home. And it's not hard to see the appeal or the effectiveness of these movies, considering not only have these movies increased in popularity, but things like home security systems have also increased in popularity over the years too. It's much more common now to see somebody with a security system in their homes than it was, say, in the early 80s when I was a child. So I can see how it is reflecting a very real societal fear, people being afraid of actual home invasions or burglaries or things like that in their home. And so it might be as simple as that. It might not be allegorical at all. It may not be reflecting some sort of allegorical fear. It might be literally reflecting an actual fear that people have. And I think that's probably the most accurate thing. It taps into that fear people have of being violated, of having their home violated, having their safe space violated. It's a powerful thing. It's the kind of thing where if your home's not safe, well, where do you go? What do you do at that point? And that's why I think the movies can be extremely effective and extremely scary. As such, I tend to like this subgenre quite a bit. I think that the movies that fall into the subgenre work really well, at least for me. Like I said, it's a particular concern of mine. I'm very into home security and things like that. So it taps into something for me personally that is very almost primal, if you will. And so these movies tend to get under my skin a little bit. I wouldn't go so far as to say they necessarily scare me per se, but they definitely are effective. They definitely draw me in much more than many of the other subgenres that we've discussed. So this one tends to be, I don't know if I'd call it a favorite of mine per se, but I definitely would call it one that I like quite a bit. I tend to like the movies in here quite a bit. And that's very true for the movies we're talking about today. I like all of these movies that we're talking about today quite a bit. We're going to go ahead and put them in order, undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate level order, in the order of intensity, with the caveat being that this is like my opinion of how intense they are. And your opinion may vary. You might shuffle these up yourself, undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate. You might not feel that they are in the same level of intensity as I feel. This is how they worked for me. But I'll be curious to see how you guys feel about it as well. So without that, let's go ahead and break on into these. Sorry. The first home invasion horror movie we're looking at today, the undergraduate level selection, is The Purge. The Purge came out in 2013 and was not a huge hit when it came out, but it was enough of a cultural movement, or a cultural had enough cultural impact in it to spawn quite the franchise and kind of become a bit of a cultural lexicon term. But I'll explain in a minute. If you haven't seen The Purge, it takes place in a near future where the laws have changed in America to allow one day where crime is legal, or really one night where crime is legal, and anybody can do anything they want, including murder, without any repercussions or criminal liability. And it follows one particular family, one specific family, a rather wealthy family in a good neighborhood, while purgers are trying to break into their home. And as usual, I'll leave it there. I don't want to get too deep into the details in case you haven't seen it. But the movie is a fascinating exploration on society, American society specifically, and American psyche or human psyche. I think that the movie winds up being more of an interesting psychological experiment than it does in terms of being an actual scary movie. And as the franchise goes on, that becomes even more and more true. The movie stars Ethan Hawke, and that gives the movie a lot of weight to it. Ethan Hawke is, an Academy Award nominated actor. He's a very, very good actor, and it gives this movie a bit of a pedigree. It gives it something of a high concept or prestige almost appearance, and yet it's kind of a B movie, and that's an interesting thing. And side note, Ethan Hawke is kind of quickly becoming a bit of a scream queen. We'll talk about it maybe a little bit more in the future, but he's popping up in a lot of horror lately. So, you know, maybe he's not as high prestige as he was at the time that this movie came out. But I digress. The Purge is basically people trying to break into a home. It's a B movie might be a bit of a strong term, but it's not particularly deep, except for the whole political angle of it. And by political angle, I mean this idea that the United States has decided that if everybody has one night where they can purge themselves of their feelings of anger or hatred or whatever, and just do whatever crimes they want in one night, get it out of their system, if you will, then the rest of the time there will be very little crime because everybody just waits for that purge night, gets out in one night, and the rest of the night the rest of the time they behave themselves. And it's an interesting idea. In the movie, it's indicated that it's actually working. But I think that's where the meat and potatoes of the movie is. I think that's where the interesting part of the movie lies. Otherwise, it is just a home invasion movie, but it's a good one. It's a good one. It's got some people in creepy masks. Question about how creepy the people trying to invade the home actually are. And this is a theme that you're going to see quite a bit in this video. But when you find out kind of what's under the mask, it gets a little less creepy, frankly. But it's an interesting movie to see this guy who's like, I think he like sells home security systems. So his house has state of the art security, to see how they're trying to get past that security and get in. And of course, there's a family angle too. There's family drama tied up into this that lends itself to the plot and moves the plot along in ways that I think work pretty well. And again, Ethan Hawke holding it down. He's a great actor. So, and everybody in the movie is good in the movie. It's a well-made movie, and it's well-paced, well-directed. Everything is good about the movie. I don't know why I'm hedging on it so much. I actually like it quite a bit. I guess I'm hedging on it a lot because of the franchise. And the franchise is, again, really interesting from an allegorical societal examination standpoint. As it delves further and further into society and what the purge means and the political ramifications of that. In that case, I do mean political ramifications. That's interesting stuff, but it gets further and further away from horror at that point. It really becomes more of an action movie or an action franchise a little bit at that point. They've made a couple of sequels. I think they have another one coming out. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. And they also did a TV show, and all of them are good. None of them are amazing, but all of them are good. They don't have Ethan Hawke in them. They mostly follow Frank Grillo, who I like quite a bit. But they're all interesting, and they're trying to say something. And I appreciate that they're trying to say something. I appreciate that they're trying to um, be a little bit more than just kind of schlocky home invasion movies. In fact, they're really not home invasion movies for the most part after the first one. But I question whether or not it's a little heavy-handed, question whether or not it's terribly successful in delivering its message. And it definitely becomes less of a horror movie or horror franchise and more of an action franchise as it goes on. That's not a complaint. It's just an observation. I still think it works really well. And as you know, I think the genres bleed into each other quite a bit. We'll actually be talking about horror action at some point in time. And I actually could have put this franchise onto that, into that subgenre. But the first movie really doesn't fit into. The first movie really is a bona fide home invasion movie. And I do think it really works well as a home invasion movie. And that's really why I wanted to lead off the video with this one. If you haven't seen The Purge, you've probably heard of it because, again, as it franchised out, it became more and more well known and more mainstream. I mean, they even do mazes on a Halloween Horror Nights. But it's definitely worth checking out that first one. Opinions vary on this. I know that a lot of people really like this movie, but I found as I've gone on that a lot of people really don't like this that much. And again, I wonder how much of that's influenced by the franchise. But the first movie is a solid. It's a solid home invasion movie. It's got good acting. It's well made. It's an interesting story, and it's got a really interesting backstory that will get explored more in future movies. So if you like it, there's a lot more to go into. And if you don't like it, you can just stop there. It's really easy. And if you have seen The Purge, give us some thoughts in the comments below. Do you like it? Do you think it's kind of weak? What are your thoughts on the concept, the high concept of the Purge night itself? What do you think about that? What do you think about the villains and their scary masks? And give us all your thoughts on that. What I've said here. Give us counterpoints if you got them. I like people having that information. But and if you haven't seen The Purge, definitely check it out. The next home invasion movie we're talking about today, the graduate level selection, is The Strangers. The Strangers came out in 2008, and this is a movie that I actually liked quite a bit when it came out. And actually, I think I still do. I revisited it not too long ago, and I think it pretty much holds up and it still gives me the same feelings that I had when I first saw it. If you haven't seen it, the movie is about a couple who live in a remote house, and they get interrupted in the middle of the night by a girl who is looking for her friend Tamara, and she seems to have the wrong house. But shortly after that, they start to see people outside who seem to be trying to get in, or at least just trying to scare them, and they're a little put off by that, obviously, because it's really unnerving. And we're gonna leave it there. I don't want to spoil the movie, of course, if you haven't seen it, but the movie is highly effective for a number of reasons, in my opinion. The first of which, of course, is that the the characters that are trying to get in, the titular strangers, are really great. They have these wonderful masks that are creepy, and they are mostly silent, and they are just kind of creepy and quiet. They're not banging their way in. They're not trying to use brute force. They're creeping around, and they're mostly like trying to unsettle you and watch you, or watch the characters, I guess, but by extension you, because you kind of put yourself into their shoes, and it's very, very effective. I mentioned a little bit in the Purge about the masks in the Purge, which I thought are pretty cool. But again, once you know what's under the mask, it becomes a lot less scary. The strangers take that to heart because they never show you what's under the mask. The masks are the faces, and that keeps the intruders scary throughout the entire movie. Very effective, very good, a very nice move. The movie stars Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, who are both, in my opinion, quite good here. Now, I know opinions vary on this, apparently. Some people don't like them in this. Some people think that they're unlikable characters. I think that's a little bit of the point. You start with them kind of in a bit of a relationship drama, which becomes very secondary, obviously, as things go on, the events happen in the movie. But I liked having that little bit of background in them. It made them feel like real people, to me at least. It made me feel like I could connect with them because they were flawed people. They were not necessarily good people, but you were still rooting for them. You didn't think they deserved to get, attacked or anything like that. I think the movie's really well directed. It is, like many home invasion movies, set in one place, set in one location, and they use that location rather well. You get a pretty good idea of the space and the geography of it, and so you're able to follow what's going on in the movie really, really well, and it helps to ratchet up that tension too. You start thinking about the ways you could deal with this, and you start to realize that those ways won't work out. It's one of my favorite things in horror movies is when the writers and the director take into account that you're going to be, as an audience member, trying to solve this for yourself and figure out how you would deal with it, and then they cut those things off from you. The things that you would think of doing don't work. They show that they wouldn't work. I like that kind of thing. It really helps put you in that space, and also keeps that tension up, that keeps that terror up. You realize, oh, I don't know what I would do here. That's scary, and I like that. And I do think The Strangers is scary. I do think it's a scary movie. I do think it works really, really well. They also did The Strangers at Halloween Horror Nights one night, one year, and I remember I they would just the people playing the strangers would just kind of stand around and like kind of creep up on you and stare at you, and that's all they would do. And I remember I kept trying to get a picture with one of them. I tried to get up next to one of them, and every time I did, they'd go away. They'd like vanish. They would get away. It was a lot of fun. It was like they were really in character to the movie, where they would just kind of disappear and vanish. They would never stay in one place for too long, and they weren't letting you capture them on camera. I've got a lot of shots of me with like some blurry thing moving out of the way, and it worked out really, really well. They were very, very good, very, very effective. It's really like the way the movie works out. You know, you see these characters, or the protagonists see these characters, and then they disappear, they vanish, they can't find them, and it's just like they're messing with them, and it's very, very captivating, very, very gripping. I really, really like The Strangers. Now they did do a sequel to The Strangers called The Strangers Prey at Night, and diminishing returns, as I like to say. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not nearly as good or as effective as the first movie. I didn't connect as well with the protagonist in this movie. The setup was a little bit different, and it's fine. It's good. There's one scene in the movie in particular that's excellent. It's really fantastic, and it kind of gives you an example or a hint at to what could have been with the movie. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite live up to that one scene. But overall, it's worth a watch. But it's not great. The original is far better. It's really, really great, and it really does. It taps into not only that fear of your home being invaded, your personal space, your personal safe space being invaded, but also the randomness of it. That's one of the keys to The Strangers and what makes it work so well is that it's, ostensibly a random attack, not motivated by anything, and it's something we've talked about in other subgenres before. The idea of when the more you explain the motivation of a villain, the less scary they become. The Strangers understands that and it doesn't delve into that. Um, Very effective movie. I really like the way they put this thing together, and it does have a lot of fans. And like I said, it does have some detractors too, which is a shame. But I'm a big fan of it. If you're not a big fan of it, if you've seen it and you don't really care for it, let us know in the comments why. Give us your reasoning of where you think The Strangers falls short. But for those of you that haven't seen it, I would recommend it. I think it's great. I think it's a lot of fun. It is unsettling, and like I said, you either know if you are either into this kind of movie or you're not. If it's for you, then I definitely check out The Strangers. I think it's one of the better examples of the home invasion horror movie. So if you haven't seen it, check it out, and then come back and let us know what you think. And the last home invasion horror movie we're talking about today, the postgraduate level selection, is Them. Them, also known as Ills, came out in 2006. It's a French film, hence the Ills, and it's not as well known as some of the other movies we've talked about already, but I do think it is exceptionally good, and that's why it's my postmodern selection. If you haven't seen it, the movie is about a couple who live in a remote area. You see these setups tend to be the same, and they are experiencing weird things like their cars being moved, and there's clearly somebody outside messing with them and trying to get in, and they are basically trying to protect themselves and fend off these home invaders and try to figure out what's going on. And I'm very, very reluctant to tell you any more than that because I really don't want to spoil this one for you. I really, really, really don't. Them is one of these movies that when it came out had a bit of the buzz in the horror community, never really seemed to go very mainstream. And I chalk that up in large part to the fact that it's French. It's a subtitled film, and those are, very rarely do those get to be mainstream. And secondly, because of the subject matter, home invasion horror movies are kind of a niche thing. Like I said, the first two movies we talked about got some mainstream popularity, but overall, I would say that not everybody's up for a home invasion horror movie, and I think that those two things, foreign film, home invasion movie, really work together to keep them being non-mainstream. And it's a shame because the movie is excellent. The movie is set in, I think, Romania or something like that. It's a French film, but I think it's set in like Romania, and I think it's actually filmed in Romania. And that kind of adds a little bit to it too, because things are different there for an American audience watching it, or even arguably a French audience watching it. We don't necessarily know the rules, we don't know the culture, we don't know anything about that, and so that adds an extra layer of interest into the movie because not only are you not sure what you would do because the movie will kind of cut off your ideas of how you would deal with this, but you're not even sure if some of these things would work because you don't know how things work in that region. Now, it's a little hard for me to explain why I think this movie is a little bit more intense than the others without spoiling it. So I have to tread a little bit lightly here. But what I would say is the most disturbing part of this movie is the reveal of who the intruders are. Um, and like I said before, the less you know about a motivation of the villain, the more scary it is. I think that them retains that, but still has a reveal about the villain that actually makes it more unsettling, more disturbing. And them, not unlike many other movies. In fact, I think technically The Strangers also say this too, based on a true story, but based on a true story. Um, we've heard it before, and it's kind of a flimsy true story that it's based on at best. But when you figure out kind of the reveal, you can see how realistic it would be and how disturbing it would be, and given the society that we live in, how possible it would be. And that I think is what makes it so intense. It makes it really feel real. It makes it feel like it could very much happen. Now, at the same time, it also kind of undercuts a little bit of the tension, a little bit of the scariness of it, because like I said, the more you reveal about a villain, the less scary they are. There's an aspect of it that kind of undercuts that. And again, I can't go into the specifics without spoiling it. I just desperately don't want to spoil it because it's a good chance you haven't seen it. A lot of people haven't. And you should. If you liked The Strangers, I can pretty much guarantee you'll like them. If you like home invasion movies, I could also pretty much guarantee you would like this one. It's one of the best ones that I've ever seen. I really, really enjoy this movie. I think it's extremely well made. It's very well paced. It gets right to it, right to the good stuff really, really quick. And it's also got a pretty fun setup. I won't spoil that either, but it's got a pretty fun opening scene to set up the villains and stuff. And so a really fun movie, really well made. It's not one I would have put in New French Extremity because it's not exactly what you'd call gory per se. Definitely not to the level of a New French Extremity movie. It's just a French horror film. To me, it is a quintessential example of what the home invasion horror movie can be. It's to me one of the best examples of it, one of the most effective examples of it. As you can see, I'm very high on it. So again, if you've seen it and you have a different opinion, by all means, let us know in the comments below what your thoughts are on it. But if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen them or ills, and sorry about my French on that, but pardon my French, if you will. But if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend checking it out if you like the home invasion horror subgenre because it's like I said, it's extremely well made. It's a great ride. It's creepy, creepy as hell, and it's got an interesting resolution that I think makes it all the more chilling. So hopefully I haven't oversold it. Let me know if you go check out Ills Them. Let me know what you thought of it. Did I oversell it or was I dead on? Come back to us in the comments and let us know. So that's going to do it for our selections for the home invasion horror subgenre. But we've got a few extra credit movies for you if you are enjoying this subgenre like I do and want to get a little bit more. The first movie I'm going to mention is a movie called Panic Room. And Panic Room is a David Fincher movie starring Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart. So as you can see, it's a lot more mainstream than the typical horror movie. And if you're not familiar with it, Panic Room is basically the story of a mother and daughter who are fending off a home invasion by getting into a panic room, a room that is designed specifically to keep you safe while you are in the midst of a home invasion. And I won't go too into the details of it, but suffice to say, it's a surprisingly good thriller. And you'll notice I use the word thriller because that's generally how it's marketed. And you know my whole thoughts about thriller versus horror and how I feel like thriller is just a term that gets used to like undercut horror. So I'm putting it in here, but I'm acknowledging it's less of a horror movie and more of a thriller movie, but it's a really good one. It's really well made, of course, because it's David Fincher. I think it's maybe his third or fourth movie. It's a fairly early movie in his career, and he's still kind of doing his David Fincher camera gimmick stuff, but it's good. It's really good. And of course, Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart are excellent, excellent actors. They are really, really great in the movie, and they ground it. The movie could spin off into some ridiculousness, but for the quality of the actors on the screen and the quality of the directing, it's a very well made movie. And if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. It's pretty well known. It was a pretty mainstream movie, but it also seems to have kind of faded away a little bit. It really hasn't endured as much as I would have thought. Fincher has become a big, big director, and I don't see this movie get mentioned as much as so many of his other movies have. And I think that's interesting. I think that's a strange thing because it is quality. It is a good movie, and again, as far as home invasion movies go, I think it's a great representation of it. But the reason it doesn't make the syllabus proper is because it's not as horrific. It's not really as like much as true horror as some of these other movies. But definitely worth your time. Definitely worth checking out. Check out Panic Room. The next extra credit movie I'm going to mention is a movie called Hush. And Hush came out a few years ago and made quite the impression. It was, I think, it was streaming, and a lot of people were buzzing about Hush when it came out, and for good reason. If you haven't seen it, Hush is the story about a woman, a deaf woman, living in a remote area, and a masked man who is trying to get in and torment her. And of course, she can't hear, so she's at a bit of a disadvantage in this one. And it's a neat twist. The deafness is a neat twist to the home invasion trope or the home invasion formula that works out really, really well in this movie. And people really gravitate to this, and this one really was quite popular. And like I said, for good reason. It's made by our guy Mike Flanagan. We've talked about Mike Flanagan quite a bit on this channel, and it's because he's an exceptional horror director. He is really, really great, and his skills are on display here. The movie is strong. It's really well directed. The performance is good by the main girl. It's really, really powerful. It really works really well. There's some really chilling scenes where she can't hear her attacker, and he's just sitting there messing with her, and it works really, really well. Another example of a really great, masked man with this mask that is, kind of just plain and ordinary, and it's a very effective mask. However, it breaks that rule that we were talking about earlier, and at some point, the audience gets shown what's underneath that mask, and it loses so much when that happens. And that's one of the problems I have with Hush, and that's why it didn't crack the syllabus, is that that moment of seeing what's under the mask undercuts the scariness so much. It's amazing how much a peek under the mask can really deflate the horror of a situation, and that's what happens in this movie, unfortunately. Now, that said, it's still an excellent movie. It doesn't ruin the movie, it just brings it down a notch or maybe two. It's unfortunate because it's a misstep that Mike Flanagan generally doesn't make. If you've seen his other movies, something like that doesn't usually happen, and it happens here. And I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know what the motivation of it would be, but I do know that it has a negative effect on the movie. Not enough to spoil it, not enough to ruin it, not enough to say I wouldn't recommend it. I absolutely would. I'm recommending it right now. If you haven't seen Hush, you should absolutely check it out, especially if you like this genre. Even if you don't, this is one of those movies where I feel like, even if you're not really that big into the home invasion subgenre, this is a movie you might get into anyways, because it's just really well made. It's really, really good. And it's a fresh take on the subgenre. It's a fresh take on the trope of the home invasion movie that I found to be very refreshing. So overall, I'd say I really, really like it. It's definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it. Hush. And by the way, don't get confused. There's another Hush movie I think stars Gwyneth Paltrow. That's another horror movie. That's not the one we're talking about. Don't watch that one. Watch this one. And the last extra credit movie that I'm going to mention today is Incident in a Ghostland. And Incident in a Ghostland, also known as just Ghostland, is a movie that I talked about briefly in my video about horror recommendations for Halloween. And I absolutely love this movie. It's a movie that caught me off guard. I saw it streaming and had no idea what to expect, and it blew me away. If you're not familiar with the movie is about a family, a woman and her two young daughters, who are the victims of a home invasion and get brutally attacked. And then it jumps ahead into the future, and you're seeing the one of the girls move on with her life, but her family is still suffering the effects of that trauma, and frankly, so is she. And so, as she tries to address the trauma and her family, we kind of get back into some hijinks, and we'll leave it at that because, of course, I don't like to spoil things, but the movie is brutal. It really is an intense, intense movie. And to give you an example of what I'm talking about, the movie is directed by Pascal Laugier. And if you aren't familiar with the name, he is the guy who directed the movie Martyrs. And I've talked about the movie Martyrs before. And it is one of the most intense and disturbing horror movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And this movie is not on the same level as Martyrs. I want to put that out there right now. It's not as gory. It's not as intense. It's not as disturbing, but it's not far from it. It's pretty strong. It's pretty intense. Pascal Laugier knows what he's doing, and he made a pretty brutal movie here that I was not prepared for, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was quite good. It stars Crystal Reed as the main girl, and she gives a fantastic performance, and it's essential to this movie. It holds the movie together, but everybody in the movie is doing good work. Now the third act of the movie might kind of get a little bit wonky. It gets a little bit more strange and out there than I was expecting it to get. I thought the movie would be a little bit more straightforward, and it wasn't, but it was good. It's just a little bit weird, and I was able to roll with that weirdness, and maybe you can too. But Incident in a Ghostland, it went places I wasn't expecting it to go. It had a shocking brutality to it that was unexpected but very effective. It's got quality acting and a very good director behind the camera. It really came together nicely. And again, I think the less you know about it, maybe the more effective it is. Because I knew basically nothing about it when I put it on, and I was absolutely enthralled with it. And at the time, I didn't even know that it was by Pascal Laugier. And Martyr is one of my favorite movies, so I was only pleased to find that out after watching it, that it was him who made the movie. But I absolutely love Incident at Ghostland. I think it's fantastic. It just narrowly missed making it onto the syllabus. It was mostly just because of a room thing. It was kind of hard. I didn't really want to squeeze anybody else out to fit it here. But I definitely think it's one that's worth checking out if you have a strong constitution. If you are, a horror vet, or if you're just not that bothered by home invasion movies and violence and things like that, this one would be one I would highly recommend. If you're a little sensitive to these kind of things, if you're sensitive to trauma and violence and some gore and home invasion and all that stuff, definitely not for you. This is not a weak one. This is not a softball one. This one is a little hardcore. Not I don't want to oversell it. It's not it's not too far down the iceberg, if you're familiar with the iceberg image that's been going around. But it's definitely intense. It's definitely no joke, and so I don't want to undersell that as well. It's a great movie though, and if you are so inclined, check it out and let me know what you think, because I'm pretty effusive about it, and I want to know if it's just me or do other people like it as much as I do. So that's going to do it for this week's video. As you can tell, I really like these movies. I tend to think that they are very effective, and I really get into them when I watch them. And I'm hoping you guys do too. I'm hoping that if you haven't seen some of these, that you find some new hidden gems that you didn't know about before and check them out and wind up enjoying them. And then hopefully we can have a conversation about them in the comments. You guys have been great in the comments, by the way. You've been coming up with great suggestions, great recommendations for me as well as for the other people reading the comments. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all you guys are bringing to the channel. We're going on just about our 1-year anniversary. I think it's in 2 days as of this recording. And by the time you guys are watching this, it'll have passed. A 1-year anniversary for the channel. Couldn't have done it without you guys. And I'll be doing a video in the near future to thank you guys a little bit more properly about that. But I'm getting exactly what I wanted out of this. I'm getting the chance to meet you guys, discuss horror with you, make friends, and just have a good time and enjoying all of these different subgenres and talking about what we love, which is horror movies. So keep it up, guys. I really appreciate that. Until next week, we'll just say class dismissed.